At this time, I would love to introduce 4 singers from the Leonardtown High School Bella Voce to come on out, and they're going to sing the national anthem for us. So if I could ask you all, please rise. Thank you very much, ladies. That was lovely. I shall tell the choral director, Ms. Oostering, graduate of Leonardtown High School, how handily you performed and how quickly they came in. We just asked them just a few short hours ago if they could come in and sing the national anthem so that we could start off the evening correctly. Welcome to all who come here tonight for a very important evening to engage in a really important discussion. This follows a meeting that we had about last month, where we were talking about safety and security issues in the schools and our communities, specifically talking about social media posts and talking about the evolution of neighborhood gangs eventually to become even criminal gangs. We had a fantastic subject matter expert come down and talk to us. We had Mr. Ed Clark join us for that evening as well. That event followed, it was the day after the school shooting in Florida. So we weren't really prepared to discuss the initiatives that we have as a school system, what we're doing to keep your kids safe for an armed intruder. And the parents who were there that evening requested a follow-on meeting, and more importantly, they said that they really appreciated the communication and they sought additional opportunities to interact with all of us. So that brings us to tonight. And tonight's a really important night. For me, it's very satisfying because it's wedged in between 2 rising freshman orientation evenings. Last night at this school, we had a full auditorium, about 750 students with their parents talking about rising from middle school into high school, and we talked about the challenges of high school, how to navigate high school. And this evening, we also have had next door the Head Start program, where we talked about how we work with our children to start them off right in St. Mary's County Public Schools. So we're really seeing the beginning and the end of their time with us. So I thank you all for coming. I am not going to do formal introductions of everybody in the audience. I will tell you that there is quite a representative sampling of our local elected officials from the board, from county government, from the delegation, people who are running for office, community members who have been exchanging their thoughts with us over time. We are very, very well represented. But this evening isn't necessarily about elected officials and community partners. It's about parents and answering the questions you may have about your students and the schools that they attend and what's being done to try to keep them as safe as we can possibly keep them. So the structure of the evening is we're going to start with information. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done with the school system and safety and security, and really focus on communication. I'm then going to turn it over to our Director of Safety and Security for St. Mary's County Public Schools, Mr. Michael Wyant, who will talk about the training that we've done for all staff across the system in Run, Hide, Fight. The Run, Hide, Fight presentation ends with what law enforcement response is to an active shooter. At that point, we are going to turn it over to our sheriff, Sheriff Tim Cameron, a fantastic partner of St. Mary's County Public Schools, to talk about that relationship, the communication, and a tactical response in the event that we did have an armed intruder in our building. And then we're going to finish with Mr. Ed Clark, who is very familiar with the trip down to the Mother County, just having made it last month and then coming down again tonight. He is the Director for School Safety for the state of Maryland. This is the gentleman who is working very closely with the governor's office and with our own state superintendent, Dr. Karen Salmon. All of them are active stakeholders and very much engaged in this work. So the very first thing I want to show you is a social media piece. It's 1 minute long. This is going to be pushed out. You're the first people to see it. This video is going to be pushed out on all of our social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we're going to post it because this is the message that we want our children to hear.
All it takes is one moment. 1 moment of picking up your phone. 1 moment of looking at the screen, and in that 1 moment, you can change the future. Remember that all it takes is telling a teacher or reporting it on the website to change something that could be life-changing for someone else. There are no takebacks. That voice that tells you something's wrong, listen to it. You have that 1 moment to make a difference. Use your moment. If you see something, say something.
Worthy of a round of applause. That was created over at our technical center. Eric Millam and Marianne Williams worked together, the Chopticon student in yellow who starred in it. It's really wonderful to see our kids directly engaged in the messaging, actively engaged in interacting with one another. After we had our community meeting, and then after we had the incident in the Leonardtown community, we really said we need to get out there. We need to be really talking about if you see something, say something. So the meeting that we had in February, that same evening, a community member called an administrator in St. Mary's County Public Schools and said, "Hey, I just can't get to sleep without telling somebody this. I heard in the community that there were children on the bus talking about the Florida shooting and then talking about what they would do differently." That person called out, saw something, heard something, and said something, and contacted us. And that put in place a whole series of events that later played out the following week with a press release with representatives from the school system, the sheriff's department, the ATF, the FBI, and the state's attorney's office. That is exactly what we hope comes out of conversations like this. So to capture that momentum and to continue the message very specifically to students, because when we said, if you see something, say something, kids did, parents did. They started sharing things across Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram. They were seeing something, they weren't saying something to us, they were sharing it with one another. We had a couple of incidents where we had a lot of things being trafficked, where we had almost half of a middle school evacuated through the progress of the day because parents were upset because what their kids had read in Snapchat or had been trafficked or rumors that they heard. So at that point we said, you know what? We're educators. We don't just say if you see something, say something. Let's give some more information and some more concrete guidance. So, very specific. If you see something on social media, take a screenshot and show it to an adult. Because if you're using Snapchat, it goes away. Take a picture with somebody else's phone, but take a picture, capture that evidence. Tell a teacher, tell an administrator, tell a school resource officer, report it through our website, and we'll get to that. Do not like it, do not share it, do not repost it, don't contribute, report it, don't repeat it. And I went out and I talked to a whole bunch of students, and I have Donovan Weekly, who's a student member of the Students Superintendent's Students Leadership Advisory Committee, SLAC as we love to call it. So thank you very much, representing SLAC here tonight with your mom, Mrs. Weekly. Thank you very much. Report it, don't repeat it. If a child is, if they run across something and as soon as they see it, they turn around and share it, we're able to get to the source immediately and actually address it before it becomes some unfounded rumor that swirls through and it takes us hours and hours, if not days, to unpack back to the source. So one of the things that was shared with us at the community meeting was, we don't know how to actually file a report from your website. You know, we don't know that we have to click on the Safe Schools button. It's not readily evident. So we made a big, huge blue button. If you see something, say something, and then giving, again, education, direct advice, click here. When they click here, it goes right to our Safe Schools reporting software. Our Safe Schools reporting software, you can report via text, via email, via web directly. You can type something in. You can even from your phone, if you pull up our mobile website, you hit that button, you can go right in, you can make a phone call. All of it is anonymous tip reporting, and as soon as it goes in, it goes out to a whole direct team to respond. And that team is on notice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And following the launch of the button and the press release for the arrest that happened within the Leonardtown community, we got quite a few reports, and some of them very serious that we needed to respond immediately. Others of them a little less important. But we responded to every single one. When a threat comes in, we have a whole threat protocol. And we also, and perhaps for another meeting, a follow-on meeting, I'd actually love to bring in members of our threat response team, our counselors, our psychologists, our PPWs, and our administrators to talk about what happens when there are threats reported and we're able to gain access to the child and actually then work through the threat assessment protocol. But immediately when something comes in, we triage it for whether it's low, medium, or high risk. And low risk, we administratively note, we make contact, we track down, we investigate, we find numbers, we contact directly. If it's a medium risk, we contact the sheriff's office and we appraise them of the situation and we follow their direction. If it's a high risk, we immediately call police, and eventually we end up gathering the evidence and handing it off to them. And that's what happened in the Leonardtown case. If you see something, say something, report it, don't repeat it. I have been asked countless times, Scott, how are you going to keep kids safe? How are you going to keep kids safe? How do we keep our kids safe? And I will tell you it's the same answer that has gone back in time memoriam. The community keeps kids safe. The community keeps kids safe. Students, staff, parents, community, law enforcement. There are 18,000 kids in our schools every single day. There are 2,000 adults working with them every single day. They go home, 18,000 kids go home to their parents. That's 36,000 parents and guardians. That's half of the population of St. Mary's County every single day is getting a firsthand report about what's going on in schools. And if everybody is read in, if everybody understands, see something, say something, report it, don't repeat it, and you have the trust in us to report it, knowing that we will investigate it, we will keep our kids as safe as we can possibly keep our kids. Some of the questions that have been posed, there's been a lot of talk about hardening schools. So how soft or hard are our schools? Infrastructure. Over the past decade, with the support of our county commissioners and completely within the county CIP, we have upgraded every single one of our school facilities to have a security vestibule. That means that when you come into our schools, you can't open a door and walk directly into the school. You walk into, and so that as you came in this evening, the doors may have been spun down because we anticipated you coming in, so you stepped right through. But as soon as the school gets underway, those doors are locked, and to get in, you have to go into the main office where you're greeted by a secretary and you're required to sign in with our building access monitoring system. All right? Does that guarantee that everybody in the school is safe? No, it doesn't. That's just safety glass. That's not ballistically reinforced safety glass. If somebody wants to shoot their way in, that's only going to be a moment's hindrance. And when Mike Wyant speaks about in his presentation about Sandy Hook, that's exactly what happened. But we do have currently security vestibules in every single one of our buildings, and they do restrain the access to the buildings. We have a building access monitoring system, every single one of our schools. If you come in, you're going to be directed to the BAMR system, where you're supposed to sign in and identify your purpose, and a picture is taken of you. We have in all of our schools, around the perimeter of each one of the schools, all of our doors we have a electronic access control. So security vestibule systems, relocatable classrooms. If staff goes out for recess or PE, when they come back in, there's swipe cards on all of those doors, and that data is gathered. Now, we have been doing this over the last 10 years. These systems wear out. These systems cost money. We have security system. We have security cameras. We've got about 500 cameras in the majority of our secondary schools and a lot of our elementary schools. We've been building them over time. They are exceptionally expensive. And they are a reactive tool, not a proactive tool. Nobody sits in an office and watches 500 cameras to alert people. The cameras are used afterwards and for investigations. Classroom locks. One of the things that the learning that's come out of multiple school shootings is that the safest thing that we can do is get kids into lockable classroom spaces, and to be able to do that as quickly as possible. So we have, over the last 3 years, been replacing every single one of the classroom locks with a throw bolt on the inside, as opposed to before it was keyed on both sides. So if you wanted to lock your door from the inside, you'd have to take a key and lock it. Why did we do that? Because we weren't thinking about a shooter. We were thinking about a 14-year-old kid locking the door and locking the teacher out. All right? That's why we had those systems. We now are spending a great deal of money to do throw bolts on the inside, still lockable on the outside, so in the event that a teacher gets locked out of a classroom by a student, and it does happen, the teacher then just takes the key, can open it, and get back inside the room. That is the safest space we have. Those are fire-rated safety doors. Once they are locked, you are not going to breach that door without a considerable amount of effort. 22 school sites have had that installation. 6 sites remain. We're working on it. We're working on it. We're working on it. As we finish all of these, schools are telling us that they want additional lock spaces, and we are putting those in a queue, and when money comes from the state, that's exactly how we will spend it. All 30 facilities have electronic access control. All 30 facilities have the BAMR system. All 30 facilities have the 911 center communication via public safety radios. There are public safety radios in all of our schools to instantly access the 911 system. And every single school has a campus radio communication system that works throughout the facility without having dead spots. Again, an exceptionally expensive investment in real-time communication. 7 school sites don't have any cameras. We are completely blind on those sites. We do have 500 cameras at 23 other sites. It's $30,000 a school site to just do the initial installation for a camera security system. That's not a camera at every corner and down every hallway and every space. They become exponentially more expensive when you take a look at it. How many cameras are here at Leonardtown? About 40, yeah. So, other things that we've done 23,000 school volunteer background screenings, and of those 23,000, 1,200 were denied because they were flagged for something that was found in them. Back to the emergency campus radios. This is an incredible investment in our county. It's direct funding. The radios provide a direct link to 911. We do routine work to make sure that they are all operational and that people are actually listening to them. They'll do roll calls, they'll do drills so that we know that we are able to communicate. And that's because in the event that there was actually a catastrophic event or there was a school shooting or there was something, cell phones will not work. They will become overwhelmed, and it will be radios with which we will be able to communicate with one another. And we are able to do that, and we have that infrastructure already built in. There's been a lot of conversation about personnel. How are we going to defend our sites? We need to talk about personnel. Right now, we have SROs assigned to all of our secondary schools, one for each of the high schools, and then an SRO is split between 2 middle schools and the other 2 middle schools, so there's 5. We have safety and security assistants for all of our secondary schools, but we deploy them differently depending upon the needs of the school. We have adopt school officers for all elementary schools. This is an unpaid position. This is something that they volunteer to do because they feel like this is an exceptionally important way to work with schools. Here's some great pictures of our SROs. They're a great looking group. They're incredibly important to the community of the school. Safety and security assistants. Those were the safety and security assistants from Chaptacon High School who were recognized at the state level for the way in which they interact with the administrative team and the SRO. Adopted school officers, there they are in our schools interacting with our kids, making our kids feel comfortable with law enforcement and comfortable to share their concerns. It's incredibly important. All of our employees have background screening and fingerprinting. All of our staff and coaching staff and part-time staff working with children, they have child abuse and sexual harassment training every single year. We have school emergency plans. They're on our website. If you want a hard copy, just send us an email. We'll send it to you. They're updated every single year. You're seeing the 2018 versions right there, but if you wanted to go tonight, you can go through and see exactly how we are going to school crisis and emergency response, reunification, which is one of the largest things that school systems will have to work through, and then in the event that there's some kind of a catastrophe with Calvert Cliffs, we drill that every single year. We also do evacuation and shelter in place and reverse evacuation and lockdown and drop and cover and hold and severe weather emergency drills every single year. And then over the last several years, as school shootings have become a larger topic and we have learned from every single one of these tragic events, we have evolved a protocol to try to keep our kids and our staff who are working with our kids as safe as possible. And that training is called Run, Hide, Fight. And Mike Wyant, the Director of Safety and Security, and our security specialist, Ms. Christy Boyle, have gone to almost every single school this year to do a face-to-face training for all of the staff on Run, Hide, Fight. And at this point, I'd like to step back and let Mike Wyant tell you a little bit about that and walk you through what that training looks like. So, Mike Wyant.
Good evening, everyone. Just to touch base on, to set the foundation, it's really what I want to do tonight. I want to let you know that this is not reactionary. As Dr. Smith has already said, we've been on this since the day that I got here. It is my number one priority. It is our number one priority. It's your number one priority. This is about our children, our students, my children, my grandchildren who attend Charles County Public Schools. This is not an easy topic. And I want you to ponder as we go through the next few minutes of this, the challenge in instructing a first grader the first day of school on the Run, Hide, Fight protocol. And I just want you to think about that. How do you introduce that to a child? And the sheriff and I have done a number of these trainings together, and I'm going to steal his words. We don't want to talk about this. It's sad that we have to. It's not an obligation. It's a responsibility. In this day and age, this is a responsibility. The things that are listed here are things that we've done since 2016 to address this. An active assailant and mass casualty drill at Great Mills High School. Well over 250 participants in that. We were one of the first in the state to challenge our Student Services Department in activating a reunification center. July and August of 2016, and we do this every single year with the Sheriff's Office. They call and say, during the summer, can we come into an elementary school and practice our deployment strategies? So one, they're familiar with the buildings. Two, they know the locks, they know the layout, they know the floor plan, and they bring back to us, hey, you need to fix this. This is not going to work for us in an emergency. January 2017, surviving the aftermath of a tragedy. We brought a Virginia Tech survivor here, Christine Anderson, and talked about her experience and what we need to do to be better prepared. Because at the end of the day, hopefully, The sheriff, he will tell you, the cavalry is going to be there and stop whatever happens, but then we're going to have to recover. March 2017, National Incident Management System training for all of our school administrators, mandated in federal law, to know how we integrate with our community partners. March of 2017, a joint tabletop exercise, the FBI, the Maryland State Police, the Maryland Center for School Safety, everyone, victim services, were at the table, and we're tabletopping for the most unfortunate of events. What you're going to see now is exactly what we're training staff on this year. I will tell you that immediately following Sandy Hook, the year after that, and after there was a report written by the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Education, the FBI, where they are saying, lockdown's a good thing for schools, but you can do more. And it was all based on Sandy Hook. It's not enough. You need to empower staff and be realistic about these events. In this presentation, the next few slides are about being realistic about these events. So just to take you through this quickly, 2018, you saw the plan, the printed version. There's a copy in every school site required by law. Dr. Smith is required to send to the state every year in September a certification that we are compliant with Maryland law regarding drills and updated emergency planning. This year, we standardized on a national protocol developed by the I Love You Guys Foundation. I'll reference that a little bit later in the presentation. But we are all about plain language doctrine. If you're in emergency services, you would understand what that means is we're not doing any more codes. And I'm not going to talk about what's been in the news lately, but I can tell you that very recently I heard the words code red. That is not the national model. The national model is that we use plain language and we say, when something's happening in the building, we say what it is. Because the data will tell you, the sheriff is going to tell you, this is over quickly. And no school administrator, Mr. Wyant, the sheriff, no one else is going to be there to help that teacher that's in that classroom and those students to make decisions that are going to make a difference about saving lives. And that's where run, hide, fight comes from. So, standardized response actions, evacuations, number one. We know what evacuation is. We've done that for years. We did that. I did that when I went to school. First thing you do, first day of kindergarten. It's changed a little bit. You'll see some dynamics in a video about why that's changed, but move everyone from the building and converge at a point. The next one is shelter. Basically, that's something bad happening outside and we need to contain in a building. So evacuation, shelter. Students and staff report to a classroom, predetermined locations, contain staff and students indoors to external dangers, protect from external dangers. They include severe weather, tornado, drop, cover, hold, earthquake. 5 years ago, I don't think we had an earthquake protocol when the earthquake happened. We did the next day because I got a call. Hey, we got an earthquake. I mean, we had never had an earthquake in Maryland. Now required in Maryland law. Chemical, biological, or explosive hazards. The initial response is to shelter in place and to assess. Lockout, evacuation, shelter, lockout. Lockout's when, again, something is happening outside that may represent a threat to us, but this is more of a man-made, generated kind of thing. For example, the sheriff's office, the state police may be chasing someone, they bail out of a car, they're armed, and they're running towards a school. We're going to communicate with that school via that 911 radio immediately. Go to lockout, lockout, lockout. They announce it internally. They know all perimeter doors are shut down. Nobody, including parents, gets in or out of that building until we get the all clear from the sheriff's office, the fire chief, whoever it may be, that kind of thing. So that's a lockout. That has a component to that called reverse evacuation. Again, another mandated drill. Reverse evacuation is when students are on a playground, they're on an athletic field, they're outside the building, and we need to get them back in the building. So lockout. And then finally, the last one, and the one we're going to spend the most time on, is lockdown. Lockdown is still required in Maryland law. Lockdown in the blended model is the initial run and hide of the new national protocol for run, hide, and fight. And it's not new anymore. It's been around since, at least since Sandy Hook. So lockdown is a run and hide, an initial run and hide, and I'll explain a little bit more. But this is the protocol that staff are trained on. Lock all exterior doors. Staff and students should report to the nearest classroom or securable location. It does not say their classroom. It says the nearest securable location. Secure the room and hide. You are authorized. We are empowering staff. The sheriff will say we're giving staff options, which is exactly what the comprehensive report after Sandy Hook said we need to do better. You are authorized to take additional actions necessary to prevent harm. That include run, evacuate removing themselves and others from the threat, hide, relocate to another secured area where no threat exists, fight, survive by taking action to stop the threat. The new models are coming out. More is developing after Sandy Hook, after all the terrible things that we're dealing with. We hear something every month now about other options. And there's no one single best practice for any event. And that's part of the challenge when I instruct staff now, and this is what we're working through, is everybody wants to do the what-if scenario. And you can't do that because I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be there. They have to be empowered to make their own decisions. And yes, we are now embedding countermeasures. And you'll see some examples of that in the videos that we see. Survival is the key. Where have we been? I was in law enforcement in 1999 when Columbine happened, and I'm going to let the sheriff speak more to this as we go through the evening, but I can tell you what we do know, there were lessons learned, and there's lessons learned every time one of these things happens. You may remember in 1999, there was a school resource officer on the perimeter, and Columbine attempted to initiate a lockdown. The SRO did what he was trained to do that evening, that afternoon. He evacuated the building, secured a perimeter, and called for SWAT because he had assessed that this was way beyond his tactical capabilities. That was training then. You segue to this very unfortunate event, and it's important to talk about this. It's very depressing. But it demonstrates clearly why we're here tonight and why we talk every single day now about run, hide, fight. This is the front door to Sandy Hook Elementary School. And you can see to the right, that's a security vestibule, right? That looks familiar, huh? High-powered assault rifle takes the window out. These demographics of Sandy Hook look pretty familiar to me. 700 students in the school. Earlier that year, a new security system was installed, required a visitor to be visibly identified and buzzed in at the start of the school day. As part of the security system, the school locked its external doors that day at 9:30 a.m. The doors were locked on December 14th. The assailant used an assault weapon to shoot out the glass entrance to the school. This is the actual floor plan for Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I can tell you what I know from going to training that's been sponsored by our good friends from the Maryland Center for School Safety. Extensive training, time and time again, hearing it firsthand, is that the bad guy pulled up right here against a brick wall. He exited the car. He couldn't be seen. He walked around to the front door, the main entrance here, which you just saw in the picture. He entered. He was confronted by staff members. He immediately shot and killed them. He turned down this hallway, and in these two classrooms is where everything happened. Why is that important? Building service worker is there and alerting everybody in the building. This is why it's important. The first call to 911 was made at 9:37 a.m. The first officer arrived on the scene 2 minutes and 41 seconds after the dispatch. And they're in an overlapping simulcast area in Newtown, Connecticut. Multiple officers were being dispatched. At 9:40, the assailant ended the event by taking his own life. Can you do the math? In 3 minutes. The sheriff will tell you this evening that the 911 average response time, 7 to 9 minutes in St. Mary's County now. Why is it important that we have officers in every school? Or near every school? Or we have an adopt-a-school program? Because of that. 3 minutes. 20 students and 6 adults were killed. Frantic parents responded and descended on a firehouse across the street. This is what their reunification center looked like. And this is our worst nightmare. As a community, we can't have that because we're now trying to control chaos, and we're trying to do what we know is our main mission, and that's get you reunited with your son or daughter. Priority number one, your loved one who's a staff member in the school. This is the document, you can do the reference after Sandy Hook, that was published by the U.S. Department of Education, Department of Justice, saying lockdown's a good measure as an initial measure, but more importantly, you need to empower staff to do run, hide, fight. I was very blessed to work with some significant colleagues in the area. Larry Titus from Calvert County. We're coordinating with Charles County as well. And this training you're seeing tonight is exactly what Calvert County is doing as well. We're standardizing. We're talking to Mr. Clark about the importance of standardizing statewide and as a nation. The video you're going to see, and thanks to Wichita, Kansas, they did a great job with this. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. This is about a 6-minute video, and I think it clearly demonstrates all the challenges that are going to be facing our school staff and our students who are in a building when something like this happens. So let's watch this, and then we'll continue.
Our schools are among the safest places anywhere. Children are safer in school than they are at home, at the mall, riding their bike, or driving in a car. But as safe as our school buildings are, we've all heard reports of violent attacks in places that no one dreamed would ever be in danger. Places like Columbine, Newtown, and Franklin Regional. Troubled people sometimes lash out in violent ways. Sometimes there are warning signs, and sometimes they aren't noticed or taken seriously. The increased prevalence of guns in the home has made access to weapons much easier for children and youth. We need to be prepared for the worst to ensure students and staff members know how to protect themselves from harm. In the event that an individual enters your school with a weapon, your survival may depend on the plan you have developed and practiced far ahead of time. There are 3 things you can remember that can save a life. Run, hide, fight. Always remember, if you see something, say something. If you hear another student talking about attacking a classmate or having a weapon at school, report it. At the first sign that there is an armed intruder in your building, your initial response should be to get to a safe place. Secondly, you should alert others and call 911.
I think there's been a school shooting.
To get out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. You then need to decide whether you will run, hide, or fight. If there is an escape path, you should attempt to evacuate. Students need to stay calm and move swiftly as they follow the teacher's instructions. Staff members should help students escape and prevent others from entering the area. Get out quickly, leaving personal belongings behind. The only exception is staff should take their cell phone and classroom go kit if possible. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide. Determine if the area you are in can be secured. Stay calm and remember, help is on the way. Students can help by keeping classmates calm and listening to staff members' instructions. Block doors by using furniture and other available items. Silence all electronic devices and be very still. Even though your first instinct may be to call home, your safety depends on keeping quiet. As a last resort, if your lives are at risk, fight. Adults should take the lead to protect students. Use anything that can be used as a weapon against your attacker: chairs, hot coffee, fire extinguishers, books, and any other improvised weapon. Act aggressively and commit to your actions in order to disarm your attacker. When law enforcement arrives on the scene, their focus will be on apprehending the suspect. Once that has been accomplished, medical staff will then enter the building and treat any injuries. Be aware of your environment and consider all options for exiting to safety. Always have an evacuation plan that staff and students are capable of following. In an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may unfold quickly. The first law enforcement on the scene are not there to evacuate or help the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the attacker. When hearing of a school incident, the first impulse for parents is to immediately come to the school to find their child. This can put the parent in harm's way and interfere with the emergency response team. Parents should not call their student during an intruder incident. If the assailant is still loose in the building, a ringing phone could lead the assailant to students. Information for parents about the incident will be conveyed through ParentLink, the news media, the district's cable TV channel, and on the district's website. Parents will be notified as quickly as possible of the reunification site for their school. To make sure our schools are as safe as they possibly can be, we should all be aware and be prepared. If you see something, say something. Your actions can make all the difference for your safety and your survival. When dealing with an armed intruder, either at school or out in the public, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive: run, hide, fight.
That's what we're showing and training our staff on now. I will tell you that absolutely the plan is, we were working on the student training components of this. We have fast forwarded those. Our plan is that following spring break, that all of our secondary students will be trained in run, hide, fight. I've already started that process. I've been to all the high schools and had discussions with the students, getting some feedback about what that's going to look like. You should have seen, if you didn't, there are actually save the date flyers for May the 1st. We're bringing the Sandy Hook group here, Michelle Gay, surviving parent, and actually a lead detective, Dan Hewitt. They're going to talk about their experience, but more importantly, they have a foundation called Safe and Sound Schools, and they are developing curriculum for elementary students. And our plan is, by no later than the beginning of next year, that we will be communicating in some form or fashion these response actions to our primary level of students. So to recap, run and hide. Lockdown is a run and hide. Now, there are all kinds of dynamics. Perry Hall High School a few years ago, the first day of school, 800 students in a cafeteria eating lunch, shotgun blast goes off. Do we expect everybody to find the nearest securable location, or is it better just to run out of the building? We're empowering everyone to make the decision. Ultimately, the initial lockdown behind that door is to freeze frame, hopefully have our staff be able to garner some level of leadership and control over what's going on, assess the environment, and we're telling them, if you can get out of the building, get out of the building. That is what the sheriff's office is training for now. You get out of the building and you go. And you go and go until you know you are safe. Second level of run and hide. And we're promising, and I know because we're working with the sheriff's office, the state police, our emergency operations center from the county. There's a massive infrastructure that is standing up behind all of this when that unfortunate call goes out. We're clearing buses, and the cavalry is on the way. And we're telling our staff, if you wind up at a restaurant, if you wind up at a convenience store, if you wind up at a residence, you call 911 and you say, I'm Mike Wyant, I'm from Leonardtown High School, I have 20 students with me, we're all okay. We had to evacuate the building because of an active threat. Somebody is going to pick them up and take them to the reunification center. Now, we are also being realistic about the fact that we know not everybody's getting out of a building, because we have second-story classrooms, we have classrooms that are internal to the building, we have special needs populations, we have staff that are not going to leave them behind. We work every single year. This year, we're getting information from every school. Tell us about every special needs student and staff member in your building. Because the first thing that Captain Hall or the sheriff are going to ask me in that command post is, where are they at, Mike? Because that's where they're going to go to clear first. Priorities. We're looking at the floor plan, and we're evaluating, and we're coordinating that response. And then you saw, as a last resort, fight. Fight's a challenging word for me, and staff will tell you that I share with them that I really don't prefer that. I wish they had said survive, because it implies we're going to train everybody how to fight. That's not what this is about. It's about doing whatever you need to do to stop whatever is happening. And that means if you pick up a chair and you hit someone over the head, that's what you do. If you take a fire extinguisher and you discharge it in their face, that's what you do. You saw examples of moving furniture in front of doors. You saw an example, that last picture, of a swarming technique. That's a countermeasure. Best example I can give you of that is the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt. There was no return fire by the Secret Service. They swarmed, and they stopped the attack. So the illustration I use is, if you all didn't want me to, if you wanted me to stop talking now, if you got up and charged me, I'm not going to win that encounter. That's swarming. Look up the I Love You Guys Foundation, please. Tremendous organization founded by John Michael Keyes. He lost his daughter to a shooting in Colorado many years ago, and he's dedicated his life to improving school emergency response and safety plans. This is where we're getting our plain language doctrine national protocols from. Again, lockout, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. We instruct everyone, and our students will be told this too, you don't need permission to call 911. The Sandy Hook group is going to tell everyone, come out on May 1st, you'll hear it. 2 messages. Seconds matter. Seconds matter. And never say it won't happen here. Anybody, if you call 911, there is no permission level at all. If you see something and you feel you need to report it, you alert internally and call 911 and initiate the protocol, whatever it may be. I'm going to turn it over to the sheriff now, and again, we've worked for a number of years, and I'm going to let him address what's happening on the law enforcement side while we're doing our protocol. So, Sheriff Cameron.
Good evening. In 2008 or 2009, as memory serves, we participated in an announced and unannounced Code Red armed intruder drill at 2 elementary schools in St. Mary's County. And the purpose of this story is to frame where we are tonight. So I went to Leonardtown Elementary, where it was an announced drill, and I was part of an assessment team, and there was a couple teams made up of sheriff's office personnel and instructional staff and admin staff from that elementary school. And I remember when the Code Red was announced, and it was eerie how quiet that school got. I guarantee you at 2 a.m. with no one in that school, it wouldn't have been that quiet. It was eerie. And a little second grader came out of one of the main hallway bathrooms, and he was shuffling to get back to his classroom, and a teacher opened the door and reached out and snatched him by one of those gangly arms. And so that was when, even though I've taught this to 1,000 police officers and hundreds of instructor trainers for response active shooter, that was the first event I was involved in that I was absolutely outraged. Outraged that we were conducting Code Red. Outraged that we were teaching our police officers to storm into a school building, a place of safety and security and a nurturing environment, and we might have to engage a young person with a weapon, outraged. So again, this evening, I'm outraged, but I really appreciate the fact that you're here. In 1999, Columbine High School, Harrison Klebold set siege. The doctrine that was taught to law enforcement at the time was to surround it and manage it. So 1,200 police officers outside that immense high school listened to homicide in progress. From there, we began the active shooter, active assailant response protocols. And in our schools, we practice lockdowns. So as times have changed, so have our doctrines and our training to where we are in the run, hide, fight mentality, and where we are in our training doctrine that is you as an officer, when you arrive, you cinch it up and you go in. Your job simply is to engage the shooter and eliminate the threat. Simple. And that is the doctrine and the training that we provide our personnel. We support that with constant in-service training and equipment. The conversation, it honestly never ends. How many parents here tonight? Thank you again for being here. I'm here to tell you, you are the first line of defense, and probably the best line. That is how we learn about the threats and we identify the threats. What I focus on in the most recent case is not the outcome with law enforcement and now the prosecutor, but what did not happen. What did not happen? We eliminated gaps, and understand that that response, we've done that hundreds and hundreds of times. Of course, in most of the cases, it certainly didn't come to that. Parents, I implore you to monitor social media and talk to your children, your young people. I know that you do, that's why you're here tonight. These procedures, processes, save lives. And Mike is right, an average emergency response is 7 to 9 minutes. That's extraordinary, anywhere in the United States. Put in perspective, Sandy Hook, a 2-minute, 41-second response by police, and it was over. So processes, procedures, refinements, and target hardening, they buy time. Quite simply, they buy time and allow us to respond, either respond or have someone on the ground. So the common threads that we look at in these shootings and we evaluate, we adapt our training doctrine, we adapt our target hardening, we adapt the way we secure and provide safety for our students. But there's one common thread that often gets overlooked, and I'm waiting for it to emerge where there's emphasis placed on that, and that is mental health. And that's something that we don't talk near enough about, that is the common thread in some of these events. So again, these processes, procedures, I'm glad on the 15th that one parent identified the fact that we'd like to come back and talk about what needs to be included, added, and to identify that so parents could advocate on behalf of the schools to our commissioners who have in this past week really emphasized their support for whatever needs to be done. So again, I appreciate very much that you all are here tonight, and we'll of course be here to answer any questions. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sheriff Cameron. All right. Nope. There it is. The last questions that were asked from people responding at the meeting, what kind of cost? What are we looking at? What is this going to cost to harden our schools and change the way we do business to keep our kids as safe as possible? And I want to balance two things. First, there's a financial cost, and it's pretty staggering. And then there's an emotional cost. Our schools are not built to be hardened. Our schools are built to be welcoming places where we invite in our students and our parents and their relatives and the community, and we educate. So the more we set up perimeters and talk through all of this, we're moving away from the institution of public education in the United States. So there's a fiscal cost and there's an emotional cost. But let's talk about fiscal stuff because we can actually kind of put a dollar amount on that. Right now, if I wanted to stand up a school system safety and security assistant at every single one of our schools every single day, I would need to include about 24 new positions into our budget. And our safety and security assistants, they're about $45,000 to $50,000 plus benefits. So 24 of them, the run-in would be about $1 million recurring. If you want to arm them, add about $1.5 million on top of that, because we really need to talk then about training and protocols and weapons and all of that. SROs, and I cannot say enough about Sheriff Cameron, the leadership that he has, and his school resource officers who are in our buildings every single day. They are a fantastically dedicated protector of our children. They are also infinitely patient, because while they are there to protect against an armed intruder, more often than not, they are working with 12 to 15-year-old students. And if anybody has a 12 to 15-year-old child at home, raise your hand. It takes a great deal of patience and restraint, especially when you consider they have tasers. They're a good group. If we wanted to put an SRO, if we could staff an SRO at every single building, we'd need 23 more bodies. And they're $180,000 a year to start for their whole package and the patrol and the weapons and everything like that. That's a $4 million investment, probably with a recurring $3 to $3.5 million follow-on cost to keep them there. In a perfect world, that would be wonderful. There's nothing better than coming up to a school, seeing a patrol office, seeing the SRO's vehicle out front, walking and seeing that SRO interacting with kids in the hallways, working with teachers, providing lessons, being that part of the school community. That is fantastic. That's $4 million if you could actually staff it. Metal detectors. I've heard we're going to put metal detectors in. Who's traveled by plane lately? Did you put 2,000 people on a plane in any appropriate amount of time? Every single morning, buses line up in front and cars park, and almost 2,000 kids enter this building in under 3.5 minutes. You can't metal detect that. You would have to substantially change the way the building is. You would have to, because you couldn't have them lining up outside. That's a target-rich environment. We have to figure out some way to get 2,000 kids into a space and then queue them for metal detectors and then to get them through. I don't know. People can say there's schools that do it. Well, they're in places where they probably don't have 2,000 kids, and I'm not sure the protocol. That's not something realistically that we could even cost out. And the other part of that is, the image is, do you want kids lining up and wanding, little kids? I mean, that's going to change the way people perceive schools. Ballistic laminate safety glass. We've done a little bit of research into what it might cost. Just level 2 ballistic glass, that doesn't stop all bullets, but it will stop a bullet. It's about 10 times as expensive as the current glass. So the doors out there, we spent about $6,000 for the safety glass for the second set of doors. So it'd be about $60,000 for level 2 ballistic glass just for that. And really, commercial grade is level 3, and I don't have a cost on that, but that's really, really quite expensive. Barricading doors, I thank you for everybody who sent me the newest device that can lock a door, there are a whole host of them out there. I shudder to think, that we've got 17,000 doors. We have 17,000 doors in our 30 facilities, all right? So we are methodically going through and taking instructional spaces with our safety fireproof rated doors and putting thumb blocks on the back and going through it. And that really is one of the very best ways that we can keep kids safe in schools, and we can practice it and we can work with staff. But all the others, they're great ideas, but you're trapping children inside a classroom. And that's alarming for me.
I've got one question.
Sure.
So you're telling us a lot about the cost here and what, you know, may not be funded. Now, are any of these good things to have? But because you can't fund it, you know, it's an issue.
Yeah, well,
I mean, have you prioritized and looked at all these things that you're showing us and saying, you know what, none of this stuff really does good in the first moments, you know, that you might have an attack, and so we're really, or is it just a funding issue, or is it also that it's not gonna really help?
well, so the one thing that the state's really looking at, and they're talking about the governor's money, and actually Ed Clark from the Center of School Safety from Maryland, the one button to lock down the entire school and immediately notify 911, that is something that we don't have in all of our schools. That is something that we would like to have in all of our schools. Anything that can decrease that response time, that is costly, but that is something that we should be working on. Ballistic glass in the front security vestibules, there's a great deal of interest in that. I really do believe in that. There's just a great deal of cost. So we're going to have to build out what that looks like. It took us a decade to build what we currently have. Take that cost, multiply it by 10, that's what it's going to cost to put ballistic glass in there. I think that's an advisable way to go. That's a sound investment. We know from prior instances that that would be something that would slow down an intruder. The last is when we talk about, we're talking about all these different defensive things that we can use for our teachers in classrooms. Nobody's talked about ballistic shields. When you're talking about, you know, how you're going to survive and how you're going to defend, don't count out a ballistic shield. Something that you can hide behind. Something if you needed to charge an assailant, don't have them run up with a fire extinguisher, a ballistic shield. And they're extremely expensive because they work. If you actually trained a school staff to respond to an intruder with ballistic shields down a hallway, you could absolutely block the progress of somebody coming down a hallway with a minimal amount of staff and the best likelihood of being able to defend themselves behind the shields. Those are just things that, you know, we are really thinking out of the box. And actually, when we conclude this presentation after Mr. Clark speaks, we're going to shut this down. We're going to talk through, and we want to explore options with you. We want to talk about what we're doing and what your thoughts are. So with that, I would like to invite up Mr. Ed Clark, who's the Executive Director for the Maryland Center for School Safety. Mr. Ed Clark.
Good evening, everyone. How are we doing out there? Anybody's pulse rate a little bit high? Mine is. You know, we say when we meet with our school superintendents and our security directors, I always ask the question, what gets you up at 5 a.m. in the morning? And I don't have very much hair left. And when that makes the hair at the back of your neck stand up, you know, when we talk about protecting our kids and our staff. And after that horrific tragedy in Florida a couple weeks ago, I was 15 minutes early. I got up at quarter to 5 in the morning. And I said to myself, what can we do better? How can we do a better job in all of our schools, both our public schools and our private schools in Maryland? So I'm sure you all have had those moments as well. So I think tonight is just a great example of really listening to you all, the parents, the school community, to give us suggestions how we can be better prepared in the state of Maryland. I know we have members of our legislature here tonight. Our legislature in 2013 had division under the leadership of Delegate Jay Walker from Prince George's County. Maryland created a Center for School Safety. We are, right after Sandy Hook, the tragedy at Sandy Hook, we came into existence. And, you know, that's important. We're about one of 20 nationwide school safety centers. But we're very unique because where we are located, we're not located in a school building. We're not located at a university level. We are located in the State Fusion Center of Maryland, the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center. And that was a brilliant and strategic placement. And the reason why we say that, we're not keeping data on kids. We're not doing intelligence checks on kids. But where we are and where we're positioned, we're able to get immediate, accurate, and timely information in terms of school safety and terrorist-related concerns. And then what we do in turn is immediately take that information out after it's vetted and share it with all 24 school districts here in Maryland and our private school partners. So we're very, very fortunate to have that capability and where we're located. And again, that puts Maryland on the map. We're in the forefront there. I also want to introduce my colleague, Mr. Dino Pignataro. The two of us, we are your school safety center in the state of Maryland. And we love coming here to St. Mary's County, and our standing joke is, we're two guys, we have a truck and a half, and we go anywhere in the state to talk about school safety and security. And we do. Following that tragic event in Florida, many of our school superintendents and our law enforcement leaders have been having school safety forums just like this. So we've been at Howard County, we've been at Hartford County. Yesterday, Dina and myself were in Dorchester County, where we initially met with the superintendent to discuss school safety and her concerns. We attended a community meeting last night, and then I stayed over. I didn't mean to, but bad weather. So I wanted to make sure to get back to this meeting. We had a meeting this morning with local law enforcement and the school safety leadership team to discuss the very topics. How could Dorchester County be better prepared in the event of an active shooter? So we have these very, very serious conversations. But our overarching mission is to work with all public schools, our school safety and security directors, our superintendents, our chiefs and sheriffs, fire and rescue, Homeland Security, to make sure that we have a coordinated and comprehensive approach to school safety and security throughout the state of Maryland. And one of the things that we're very, very proud that we do, following the horrific event in Paris, the terrorist attack 2 years ago, we hold a weekly school safety conference call amongst all of our partners, law enforcement, our school safety security directors. Sometimes we have school counselors, school psychologists. At times we have local state's attorneys that are on the call. And what we do, we get a high-level briefing as to any terrorist-related concerns to the state, to the country, both from the director of the Fusion Center, but we have a partnership with the DC Fusion Center. So we get that. One of the things that we've talked about over the last several years is when we have these horrific events and when we have these terrorist-related events, is it safe to send our children on field trips, either within the state or out of the state or out of the country? So we have these great conversations. We talk about best practices. Following the horrific shooting, the Kentucky school shooting, that following Monday, we were the only ones throughout the country that had a high-level briefing as to what occurred there on that school campus and that tragedy, more importantly, how they responded. So that's what we do. Recently, these calls were usually in at about 20, 25 minutes. For the last several weeks, and you know what has transpired, they're going a little bit longer. But we have these serious conversations. What can we do better? We share information. Then we hold a roll call. Mike Wyatt, the security director, he's one of the last to go because we go alphabetically. But Mike gives a great briefing, and he shares the great things that you all are doing here in St. Mary's County. So that's very, very positive. Now, one thing I will tell you, we have just been inundated throughout the state, not necessarily here in St. Mary's County, but we have seen a significant increase in these social media threats, these school shooting threats. And we've been talking about on that call, how can we get the word out to our students? How can we develop a PSA? Well, we saw it here tonight. So I want to congratulate St. Mary's County Public Schools for that PSA. We've been given permission from Dr. Smith to share that statewide. And it's great because what's happening is these students are reposting those messages, and it just causes tremendous anxiety. We're in the business of educating children. Well, we've seen loss of quality education time because of these threats. We've seen low attendance the next day. We've seen increased police presence on our campus, which we're all good. But getting that out. So I think, Dr. Smith, you should trademark that slogan. That's great. Report it, but don't repeat it. And that's the message we're trying to get. And we need your help. We need your help as parents to have those conversations with your children. Go to that responsible adult, but please don't pass that on. And in today's world, I'm not a techie, but they can easily hide. And our law enforcement teams, they're working round the clock. And the sheriff will tell you how much time it takes to run down those leads. So their resources are being strained as well as ours, but we're never going to give up, and we're going to continue to run these leads down there. Some of the other things we're here now, Governor Hogan has made an announcement last week. He's pledged his commitment to increase opportunities for school safety initiatives. We think that's a great opportunity here. We hope that those initiatives will pass because that's going to allow us to get a little bit better here in the state of Maryland. So again, that puts us on the national map that we're committed to making sure our schools are a safe, supportive learning environment. And you know, if we want to, yes, we can pretty much fortify any school building that we want. But you've heard Dr. Smith say we need to have that open, inviting, inclusive culture. The other thing, sure, we can hardware everything down, we can increase all those great things, technology. But what we need to continue to do is invest in those relationships with our children. Those students who are in crises, how do we recognize? Those are the signs we need to see in advance. And what we've seen here in St. Mary's is active response in connecting those dots. So again, clearly, a tragedy was averted here in your community by everyone working hard, seeing something, saying something, but we say, more importantly, do something. Don't be a bystander. So we're excited to continue to partner, and one thing, it's all about leadership. You know that. And I'm here to tell you, we travel all over the state of Maryland, work with all school superintendents, chiefs, and sheriffs. You have a dynamic leadership team here in your school district and in your law enforcement community. I've never seen two executives that are more committed than Dr. Smith and Sheriff Cameron. They are absolutely lockstep. And Mike Wyatt is certainly one of our best as well in the state of Maryland. So you have an incredible team here from your school district, your teachers, your staff, and your public safety leadership team. So you need to feel very proud of that. And they are taking a proactive position there. One thing that we're doing, we have a governing board, and Dr. Karen Salmon is the executive director or the governing board chair. And we have different members of that governing board. But one thing that's really creative, and that was created again by the legislature, one position on that governing board is very important, and it's a school bus driver. Think of that. Somebody really had a vision. Who's that first person in the morning that can really assess how those students are doing when they come onto that bus? And we saw the tragedy was averted because a conversation occurred on that bus. So that bus driver is so important there. And it takes a whole team. Everyone has a responsibility here. So it's just not our mission. It's just not law enforcement's mission. It's not your school principal's mission. It's the entire community's mission to continue to work hard and make sure that we're prepared as well as we can be. We can't make 100% guarantees, but I will here to tell you that throughout the state we're working very hard with your local team here to make sure we can avert a tragedy. When tragedy strikes, how we can deploy assets immediately, and more importantly, how do we recover and move forward? So we want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're all in this together, and again, we hope that those initiatives proposed by Governor Hogan will move forward. The other thing that the governor has challenged us to do in an executive order is state employees and state entities and agencies. We need to be better as well in preparedness, response, and recovery for an active assailant. That executive order also requires all of us to work more collaboratively together, regardless of the level of government there. Within the next couple weeks, on March 22nd, we are holding a statewide school safety summit. We're asking all 24 school districts to come as a cross-functional team. We're asking to have a representative of the superintendent, someone for central office, the safety and security directors. We would also want to see a school psychologist or school counselor. We want to have our law enforcement team there as well. We want to have a representative from the tactical community. We have a representative from fire and rescue and emergency management. And what we're going to do, we're going to have a little bit of training, but then we're all going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to assess our collective strengths and assets. But more importantly, we're going to look to identify those gaps. Individually, as a school district, a school community, we're also inviting our private school partners. They'll be mustered up with the local school districts that they come under, that county jurisdiction. And then when we identify those gaps, what are the next steps moving forward to make sure we can close those gaps collectively? And I just want to assure you one thing. We work with a great team across this state. Educators, the men and women here that are charged with the mission of school safety and security are dedicated. And in the end of the day, what you all have taught me as educators, it's all about the kids. So we want to do our level best to make sure your kids, your children are safe, and we're all in this together. So thank you. We're always glad to come to St. Mary's, even though it was a long ride from Dorchester County. Dino, what's the saying? It's never far in a state car. And especially when we're talking about school safety and protecting the lives of children who are our most precious asset. So thank you for what you do. If you have any questions, we're here. We take copious notes. And what we're going to do is kind of see these collective themes from these meetings, and then we're going to bring that up to the attention of all of the school superintendents so they'll be aware of those similar themes throughout the state. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your pledge to continue to keep your kids safe.
So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention this evening. For about an hour and 20 minutes, we have, this is poor education, where we're just talking to you and doing a PowerPoint. We want to be interactive as possible. So if you give us just a couple of minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to shut this down. We're going to get a couple of handheld mics. Everybody who's up here is going to come down there, so they're right in front of you, and we're going to offer an opportunity to answer any questions you may have, look to any contributions you may have for us. I will tell you, there are a lot of people here who I want to hear from, are particularly parents and the questions that parents have. Parents, if you are asking a question, if you feel comfortable, it helps us if you identify the school your child attends, so we can kind of give a more informed response. And more importantly, we have staff all back here. We have a whole host of principals. We have central office staff. We have our accountability officer. We have our deputy superintendent. So whatever you share, we're gonna take to heart. We're gonna go back. We're gonna try to investigate. We're gonna try to get to the challenges that you're sharing. So if you'll give us just a few short minutes, we're gonna kind of shift around. For those way over on the side, if you have a question, it'd be ideal if we could all kind of come down here so we could get a little closer so that we can hear what one another may have and we can have kind of a more intimate conversation. Okay, so we're going to do a little reset. We thank you very much for your time. We're going to make sure we have the microphones, and we're going to move on to the second stage of the evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.